Hello everyone, and a very good morning or afternoon depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Annalisa and I'll be your host for this webinar today. Thank you very much for joining us to discuss transforming teaching quality with flexible online training and Epigeum's University Teaching Core Skills collaboration. We should be taking about 45 minutes of your time today, including an opportunity for a designated questions and answer session at the end. So firstly, just a couple of introductions. We're joined today by Professor David Boud and Tessa Dagley, and I'll let them introduce themselves now, beginning with David on the left.
Oh, hello everyone. I'm Dave Boud, and I'm pleased to be with you from my home in Sydney, even though I work at Deakin University in Melbourne.
Hi everybody, as Annie said, I'm Tessa. I'm an Associate Commissioning Editor here and I look after our teaching list, and so I will be working closely with David on this university teaching product.
And finally, that's me on the right hand side. I'm the Product Manager for University Teaching Core Skills at Epigeum, and I work in the marketing team to help universities promote our courses internally. So just a quick look at the agenda before we get started. First, we'll look at Epigeum itself. We're the organisation that put together transformative online courses through a unique collaborative model. Then we'll move on to David's presentation, who will tell us more about the context of university teaching, how we change it and how we prepare for it. And following this, Tessa will provide an overview of Epigeum's interactive online toolkit for university teaching staff and also provide a brief demonstration of one of our existing courses. We'll then wrap up with a Q&A session. As I mentioned in the beginning, please do feel free to type up your questions in the questions panel on the right-hand side as the webinar progresses. So just a quick overview of Epigeum. We were founded in 2005 as a spin-out originally from Imperial College London. Our two founders created the company in response to what they felt was a lack of timely support for researchers. They saw this as an opportunity to work with universities to create accessible and interactive supported materials for researchers. Over the years, we've expanded to courses for students and teaching and leadership programs for staff. We were acquired by Oxford University Press 2 years ago, and Oxford University Press are a division of Oxford University, so we're a not-for-profit organisation in a higher education context. We've created over 92 online courses across 23 different programs, and we currently have a number more in development. So we're an increasingly globally focused organisation and have worked with over 260 universities across 30 different countries worldwide. And this map illustrates the international spread of universities that have used our courses. So I'm just going to show you a short video now, giving you a visual introduction to our development process.
The story of an Epigeum course. We come up with an idea and we consult widely to develop and fine-tune it. We commission a team of expert authors to write it and a team of expert reviewers to help them. We commission a lead advisor who gives strategic vision and leadership. And we bring together a team of universities who form a development group to give feedback on our plans and prototypes and to make sure the product meets their needs. The collaborations we build are drawn from across the world and often involve input from over 50 academics, as well as our team of in-house specialists. Because we believe that collaboration and iteration are the key to producing truly innovative and effective products. So we bring everyone together for a launch workshop at the start of each project. It's a great mixing pot where the creative juices can flow and expertise can be shared. We provide a week-long training course for our writing team to make sure they're able to get the best out of the online medium. And we provide plenty of opportunities for sampling and feedback along the way through a detailed peer review process. In fact, a typical product goes through at least 5 iterations before it's ready to be built by our in-house developers. Together, we're more than the sum of our parts, and our unique and rigorous product development process gives all collaborators access to groundbreaking courses they couldn't have created alone.
Okay, so moving on, just to summarise the content of the video you've seen, here's a couple of bullet points. Our collaborations form a development group of universities which come together and share their experience at a workshop to help us create a really high quality online course. We recruit authors, all under the guidance of a lead advisor, in this instance Professor David Boud. Then the advisory team we put in place lead and shape the vision for the programme alongside our team. We have a meticulous review process which allows the development group to look at the content of the courses, check that it matches their expectations and peer review the material. And then the development group of universities become the early adopters who get to use the material when it's first published and implement the courses at their university. So I'd briefly like to touch on implementation here, which is how the course can be used at your institution. And this can be in a number of different ways. Firstly, it can be used as a standalone academic course. You can supply the participants with an online course immediately at the time and place they need it. And so this would be in a self-study mode. Secondly, we've got the option for tutor-supported online courses. And finally, it can be used as part of a blended learning programme. Typically how this works is that participants are given access to the online course ahead of a workshop, and then the workshop would really focus on consolidation and application of the material. And of course the courses can be implemented in all three modes at once. So hopefully that's given you a bit of background to Epigeum and how we put together our online courses. I'd be happy to take any questions on that process, but now I'll just hand over control to David for his presentation.
Well, what I want to talk about is this whole issue of the preparation of university teachers for their teaching role. And what my slides consist of is that, there's an overview, and these are the points that I wish to touch upon. Just a slide about myself. Then I want to get into the ways in which university teaching has changed over the years, which has been quite dramatic. It's much more dramatic than those of us who are located at any particular point in any particular institution often realise. Alongside the changes in university teaching, there's been huge changes in the way staff development operates. And I'll just kind of give a little overview of those changes. And whilst we've been through a number of different cycles, we probably have with us now an example of every single generation of the way in which it works in different institutions at different times. I want to say something about how we equip staff for their teaching challenges, and knocking on the head this whole idea that the PhD is sufficient. Well, it was never enough, and I've done some recent research which shows that it is an inadequate preparation for the research role, even though that's what it claims to do. So what is it that we need, how is it that we need to prepare staff for teaching? And then I want to end up with some of the issues that we face now, so that we face huge diversity of staff who are mobile, who want recognition, and they want more than just a quick fix. So that's the overview. The next slide talks about my background, and I'm not going to go through that in detail. Basically, I've been around in the academic staff development business for about 40 years, both in the UK and in Australia. And I've occupied lots of different roles within that. Designing new programs, running academic development activities, being involved in the professional association, running policy for that, taking on a whole number of different positions of responsibility within the university, designing online programs, getting a profile through the Learning and Teaching Senior Fellow, and that was not focused on assessment, having done quite a bit of research on assessment and learning and teaching in higher education and a few other areas over the years. And whilst I'm emeritus at UPS, Deakin University do seem to be keen to want to employ me to run their new research centre, which is particularly focusing on assessment. So if we turn to this whole issue of university teaching and ask ourselves, where is it now? Well, if I look back when I was a student, we had lectures, and depending on whether we were in the sciences or the humanities, we had tutorials or we had labs. And there might have been one or two other things, but it was a pretty straightforward, unproblematic diet of activities. Over that period of time, we've seen the student population change dramatically. We've seen many more overseas students, many students from a diversity of backgrounds, many more mature age students, many students with different expectations from the traditional ones that used to come, and all within the same class, we are confronted with this massive variation. So university teaching now is dealing with complexity. And one of the ways we handle that is to move away from the old lecture plus tuts mode to different modes of teaching. Having face-to-face teaching, having online teaching, having blended teaching, all of these are commonplace in just about every higher education institution. And we have other innovations coming through like flipped classrooms and all sorts of other things. Another big shift is that now we no longer think about the syllabus. The syllabus is rather a quaint old idea. We have a focus on learning and particularly on learning outcomes. And in Australia at least, we are mandated by the government to focus on, pursue and to assess every learning outcome if we want to retain our accreditation as a university. It's not quite the same elsewhere, but this is a part of a much bigger trend worldwide. We're also seeing the use of all sorts of media within our programs. The idea of using video content is completely commonplace. Web-based components are ubiquitous. Other players are involved beyond the lecturer and the tutor. All sorts of professional staff have tutoring roles now. And in the background, in places that most of us never see, there's a whole dialogue about what we're doing through social media. And the students are having this conversation about us, to which we are not party. Now, we never were, but the shift from people being face-to-face a lot to using social media has also increased the diversity of things that happen. So how have we dealt with this over the years in staff development of one kind or another? Well, the original assumption was that research training is training for university teaching. Somehow, by some mysterious process, the activity of undertaking a PhD equipped us to be a professional higher education teacher. Now, we realised quite early on that this was an absurd notion, but that still seems to be the way that we mainly select new staff. Increasingly, we're looking for their teaching achievements, but not as seriously as we might expect. But that is changing. We've also moved away from the short induction workshop. Oh, well, we'll just have a little briefing for the afternoon and that will set them up for the whole career. It's a much more extensive series of workshops and seminars. So 25 years ago, we were running these things at University of New South Wales. We also, nearly 25 years ago, introduced the new wave of graduate certificates in teaching and learning in higher education. And these have become ubiquitous, certainly in Australian universities, and there's the equivalent in the UK and in New Zealand. So what we're seeing is an increase in expectation over time that staff should invest in developing their teaching. Now, all these things have tended in the past to be centralised, but we're also seeing a big move towards decentralised development within departments and course teams. Why should we expect to take someone out of their working environment, do something with a group of other people that have been dislocated from their working environment, and then send them all back when the conditions in that environment haven't changed? So there's a shift in that direction. And the other things we're seeing in recent years is the increase of portfolio-based approaches. The notion of having a teaching portfolio and that being used to judge tenure, judge promotion, judge applications, and so on and so forth. And to help in that, we're seeing frameworks like the UK Professional Standards Framework, which gives a way of kind of ordering and mapping that. And universities all over the world are taking up that initiative from the HEA. So the other shifts we've seen in the approaches we adopt to preparation is, well, I'll give you an example. When I started at the University of New South Wales, the first time I met the Vice-Chancellor, Sir Rupert Meyer, he said to me, I know what your job is. You're there to stop the lecturers mumbling in their beard and writing clearly on the blackboard. So that was one notion of what we were there for. But that shifted. We never believed that then, even if he did that. And we're seeing this shift towards a focus on understanding and fostering student learning. We're not in the business to lecture. We're not in the business to perform in front of students. We're in the business to do whatever it takes to foster the learning of students and help them meet the learning outcomes of the program. We're also seeing a shift from the face-to-face, fixed times, certain times of the year, before the beginning of the academic year, in the mid-year break or whenever, activities, to the notion now where we're having mixed mode activities. You can do them anytime, you can do them online, in a variety of different ways. And as I mentioned before, we're seeing this shift or this tension is still there between centralised provision, which is the same for the whole university, to local activities. So for example, last week at Deakin University, we signed a new enterprise agreement, and as part of that agreement, all casual staff are allowed to have paid 4 hours a year training. And that's a big step forward, given the number of casual staff we have, not just at Deakin, but everyone. So, equipping staff for teaching challenges. The thing that I've pondered for a very long period of time and been involved in various initiatives, which have not always been taken up as vigorously by senior managers as they should be, is this: why should university teaching be the only unprofessional profession? That is, universities equip just about every other profession educationally, but it doesn't do a terribly systematic and extensive job on itself. The PhD was never enough, and although we're seeing all sorts of additions now to PhD programs in which there are units which enable doctoral students to develop teaching skills, that's still not enough. A quick orientation is not enough. What is needed is an understanding and enacting of good practices. So, for example, how do we know what good teaching is if we never see it? We need exemplars, we need examples, we need illustrations, we need ways of thinking about what constitutes good in this area. And of course, we need this flexibility. It is just completely impossible nowadays, with the changing teaching population, to offer things on an annual program. We do need things that are available all the time, anytime, just in time. And of course, the other thing we mustn't forget is no matter what we do at the beginning of a teaching career, for some people, they will come in, do some casual teaching and depart. But for others, they will be spending their whole career in a teaching role or a teaching and research role. So the initial programs that we offer should provide a pathway to other things. They're only the starting point. A graduate certificate is the most trivial preparation for a profession. So what are some of the issues we face now as we come to the end of this section? Well, as I mentioned, we're seeing this extraordinary diversity in roles, in teaching activities, in position descriptions, in the kind of educational work staff are expected to support. There's been a massive differentiation of teaching activity. So if you look around a department now, different people don't just have responsibility for different parts of the course. They are doing quite different things in their teaching areas. We're also seeing a massive proportion of casualised staff. I would be surprised if there's any university in Australia, at least, that doesn't have at least 50% of its contact hours taught by casual part-time staff. And what are we doing for those people? These are the people that may be influencing the students most of all. So we need to invest in them. We also need this recognition of achievements, because especially these part-timers, are mobile and they want to be getting jobs elsewhere, and they want something they can take with them. They want to be able to say, oh, I've got some training and I've got some recognition of that training. And of course, the other thing that we also need to bear in mind is that some of those new staff that we're seeing now will go on and be the people that design the courses of the future. And to do that, they need an extraordinarily high level of educational sophistication, probably beyond what we can currently imagine. So the biggest area of underdevelopment is developing and upskilling experienced teaching staff to do really sophisticated educational things. So finally, we have this dilemma. We've got a huge demand, a huge variation of staff and staff needs. So I think we need multiple solutions for multiple purposes. So I think that all of those who have an educational role need to be equipped for it, and they need to be equipped in at least two ways. They need to be equipped generically in terms of how do they understand students? How do they understand students' learning? How can they access really high quality resources and exemplars of the kind of things they might be doing? How can they access the literature so that they can continue when there's no program immediately available to support them? So they need that generic preparation, but they also need the contextual preparation. So that if I'm a teacher teaching as a tutor on someone else's course unit, then I need to understand that course unit. I need to understand what it does. I need to know where my area fits in. I need to know what are the things that I do online or in my tutes. How do they locate? How do they build on other things? We also, as I said, need this availability at any time of the year, any time of the day, any location, any pace, inconvenient parts. And this is a huge challenge for any one university. Any one university can offer a very high quality program, but can it offer a high quality program in as many different modes as are needed? And again, as I mentioned, we need to think about all we do in this area as a pathway to other things. So we teach in universities not in order that students should understand a particular part of the curriculum. We teach in universities so that the people we teach are skilled in order to learn further and go beyond what we do with them. And that, in a sense, is what our programs for teachers need to do also. So thank you for that, and I look forward to questions that you might have, which we can consider in the final section. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. So now I'll move on to Tessa's presentation about university teaching core skills.
Hello everyone, and thank you, David. That was a really helpful presentation. So I'll be focusing more on what exactly we propose for the programme University Teaching Core Skills. To start, an overview. What is University Teaching Core Skills, or UTCS for short? It will be a flexible, interactive online teaching toolkit to help staff develop the necessary skills to teach effectively and support students with confidence within the current higher education environment. We plan to have a workshop where we will bring everybody working on the project together, including all the universities, in February 2018, and we will then be aiming to launch the following year in February 2019. So going on to the reasons why we're creating it, now David's really discussed the context in detail and touched on many of these points, but I'll just run through quickly again. So firstly, the increasing marketisation of higher education means that there is pressure on universities to take their teaching seriously. With the expansion of higher education providers, rising student numbers, and escalating fees, understandably students want to see a return on their investment. And not only do students want better support from an academic point of view, but they are also expecting broader guidance. They want to be provided with the skills that will stand them in good stead after university. They are more likely to seek pastoral support. The role of the university teacher is thus more rounded than maybe it used to be in the past. So, for example, educators need to learn about how to involve students in the teaching process, how to work with them as partners, how to embed employability into their sessions, how to address any mental health issues. Moving on to that third section there, the third row, David touched upon the UK PSF, the UK Professional Standards Framework. There's also the current main thing in the discourse here, the Teaching Excellence Framework in the UK. And there's also other frameworks such as the Australian University Teaching Criteria and Standards Framework. All of these really point to the rise in benchmarking and the need for universal comparability. As teaching becomes a more benchmarked factor in league tables, the training available to staff will influence how institutions perform, and a strong foundation in teaching and learning is key. Institutions will be required to demonstrate an evidenced commitment to teaching quality, and it's of course very important for the other reasons David mentioned. So who is it for? UTCS will essentially be a foundation programme of core skills. It will be for all new early career or less experienced higher education staff with teaching or learning support responsibilities. For institutions who do use the UK Professional Standards Framework, this aligns with the D1 category. And so if you look on the right-hand side there, just a list of the possible users of the course. So full and part-time staff, visiting faculty, which is very important, and including experts from industry, graduate teaching assistants, lab demonstrators, seminar leaders, and also administrative and learning support staff, so librarians, learning technologists, etc. This focus on foundation skills, of course, doesn't necessarily exclude anybody who's more experienced. So more experienced staff might still want to use the programme to review and refresh their knowledge and skills. So this is the expert advisor panel. As we know, David Boud is the lead advisor. We're very, very pleased to have him on board. We also have two expert advisors who will collectively form the panel, guiding us through the project. So we also have Professor Kevin Ashford-Rowe involved, Director of the Learning and Teaching Centre at the Australian Catholic University, and also Dr. Rosalind Hughes, Principal Teaching Fellow at the Arena Centre for Research-Based Education at UCL here in the UK. Both have immense experience, which will be very helpful, and Rosalind also has in-depth knowledge of the UK PSF to help us map our content as needed. Moving on to the actual content of the programme. UTCS will have a unique structure, diverging from our traditional course setup and allowing participants to easily dip in and dip out of themes according to their needs. It will consist of one introductory module, followed by 6 key strands reflecting the logical progression of teaching. So we'll start with designing, move on to developing, then facilitating and delivering, assessing, supporting and evaluating. Each strand will contain a suite of modules which can be taken in any order or in isolation. We really think this flexibility is very important. Now, this next slide shows you a more comprehensive outline. And I'll just quickly go through the brief descriptions. So in the first introductory module, we will cover what it means to be a teacher and discuss the ideas and trends in the higher education context. In the designing strand, we will explore how to design effective face-to-face, online and blended teaching and learning to suit institutional requirements, student needs and developments in the field, while also ensuring that students are equipped with the skills they need for post-university life. In the developing strand, we propose to explore again, face-to-face, online and blended learning experiences, how to develop these, how to promote active learning, how to involve students in the teaching process, and how to provide engaging, high-quality learning resources. The fourth row at the bottom there is facilitating and delivering. This will be a pretty large strand, covering everything from teaching large classes, both face-to-face and online, to teaching small groups and supporting projects and dissertations. We'll also be looking at specialist and, say, non-traditional settings, for example, labs or out in the field or in studio settings. Following this, we have the assessing strand, where we will cover how to design appropriate and aligned assessments, deliver meaningful feedback on individual and group assessments, and how to minimise bias in marking. The supporting strand brings in the more holistic element of the programme. So as I mentioned, it's how to support students both academically and non-academically, how to encourage or address student well-being, and how to navigate any challenges, as well as, and this is, we also think is important, how to navigate personal pressures and stress. Being a university teacher is not without its challenges. And finally, we'll have the evaluating strand, and within this we'll have modules on evaluating and measuring, how to rethink your teaching approach and how to redesign it based on peer, student and external feedback, and how to build on your experiences to become a reflective and proactive teacher. Here I have listed the proposed learning outcomes. So UTCS will enable staff to engage with current scholarship, quality standards and professional values. It will enable them to design and implement appropriate methods of teaching and assessment. It will enable them to create supportive learning environments, explore opportunities to work with students as partners, approach non-academic responsibilities and issues with more confidence, recognise the opportunities afforded by both online and blended learning, and finally to develop as reflective teachers who continuously evaluate their practice. How will we achieve these learning outcomes? Now, in our courses, we like to present information in diverse ways in order to stimulate the learning and keep attention. So here's a list of some of the key course features. We intend to have case studies and best practice examples, providing opportunities to learn from peers and to prompt reflection and discussion. We think it will be very valuable for users to hear how other teachers have experienced and addressed certain issues. It's always interesting to see how your peers deal with similar problems to you. Similarly, we will have scenario-based activities to give staff or course users the opportunity to apply their knowledge and their skills in realistic situations. These might be scenarios in the form of comic strips, video, audio activities, text descriptions, and so on. In the introductory section, we'd like to insert a self-diagnostic tool to help participants to identify their learning needs and to allow them to use our material in a self-directed way and in a way that fits their busy schedules, so they can assess the areas in which they already feel competent and confident, and those areas in which they do need further training that will help them target certain modules in the programme. We will integrate our impact toolset to allow institutions to gather participant data and to measure and benchmark the quality and effectiveness of the online training. Exactly what we will measure will be discussed at the workshop, and we will talk about the main areas that institutions are interested in gathering data in. And finally, we will have additional downloadable activities and templates that provide further opportunity for reflection and engagement. So as I will show in a demo in a moment, these activities will be accessible from the side of screens, and they can be downloaded to be completed offline, and they can help participants to reflect on their experiences, to reflect on their skills, to reflect how they'd like to improve, and to essentially gather any evidence that they could use in any submissions to show that they have completed professional development. So, key benefits. First key benefit is that UTCS will be very, very comprehensive. As I've mentioned, it will allow staff to develop their understanding of scholarship, best practices, quality standards and professional values, and engage with frameworks such as the UK Professional Standards Framework. We will be having two versions of the programme, one which explicitly maps to the UK PSF and one which is more universal. It will be a single, flexible resource, which will ensure that all staff, including the non-academic and part-time teachers who often, due to resource constraints, might not access the same workshops and the same training as some institutions. It will make sure that they all have access to consistent high-quality training. It can complement any existing in-house resources such as workshops, allowing trainers and teaching and learning departments to concentrate on more in-depth advanced support. There will be high-quality content and sophisticated pedagogy, developed under the guidance of our panel of international experts, and to promote engagement with the content and encourage self-reflection. And again, as I mentioned before, it will encourage staff to think holistically about their roles as teachers and to think beyond, say, marking an essay or supervising a dissertation. So I will now show you an existing teaching course which we published in 2016. So this programme is called Blended Learning. It provides in-depth guidance on how to combine face-to-face and online teaching. Now, we're developing our design, our features all the time, but I thought it'd be helpful to show some of our typical features which will be similar in the UTCS programme. So starting off on this screen, you can see that at the top we have a key takeaway. Many of our programmes include key takeaways or learning outcomes at the top of each screen to help guide users through and to flag what's the most important element of the screen. We also have an estimated duration on each screen, here 10 minutes, so that users have an idea of how long it is likely to take to work through the screen. Now, we have core content which appears in the middle, and we have pods. Now these here on the right hand side of the screen. So this useful advice pod appears here. These complement the core content, so they can contain material from definitions of key terms to useful links, for example, useful web resources to explore. So in this screen we've got some useful advice, which is very helpful to complement what you're reading here in the middle. Further down we have a video pod in which academics share their experiences and advice. And we also have a portfolio activity. I mentioned that these are the additional downloadable activities that again provide further opportunity to reflect on the key themes covered in the screen. Users can download an attached template, which is a Word document, to record their thoughts and to compile into an actual portfolio. Moving on to the main screen content. So this screen essentially introduces the concept of substitution. So it's about how to substitute some of your existing teaching approaches for new ones. One of the ways that we thought we could convey the information was via an animation. So here we've got an animation demonstrating the differences between a traditional course and one that is blended. And it's just an interesting visual way of communicating the information. So I'll see whether I can play a couple of seconds of that.
I used to teach in a traditional way. Over the course of a semester, I'd usually have one lecture and one tutorial a week. But once I started a more blended approach, the structure of my course became more flexible. You can see from the design that in weeks 3 and 9, I decided to replace my traditional lecture with a short 20-minute video clip.
So every video and audio activity we have will have a transcript underneath, and incidentally, every screen has a text print version. You can access this at the top. Further down the screen, we've got an interactive activity. This one is a simple one, a note-making screen, whereby users will reflect on what they have seen in the animation and think of their own experiences and their own thoughts. So they can type their answers here, click for feedback, move on to the next question, and then they can view a summary which they can also print and again keep. Now, moving on to another screen in the blended learning programme, just to show some different ideas. This is a module on just the first steps in taking a blended learning approach. Now, here's another pod. In here, there's a useful link, so click out to read. These useful links are all collated in a resource bank at the end as well, so they've got a very convenient go-to place for any further research. This next activity is an interactive, it's labelled graphic, again just chunking the information, presenting it in a clear way. An opinions activity further down offers the user views from, in this case, academics. So these aren't necessarily real, they are created to convey a point. And sometimes we have audio opinions activities in different ways, but it's useful to see different perspectives. Lastly, another of our typical activities is it's called a paragraph sequencing activity. Essentially, it allows you to rank elements. So here the user is required to look at the different statements and rank them in order, in the order in which you think they should be considered. So you drag and drop them into the chosen position. In this particular activity, it's a personal order, it's subjective, it's to really get you thinking about what you deem as most important. But other activities like this might have correct answers, and in which case we will have a show the correct answers button and it reorders to how it should be. So I hope just this brief demonstration of these two screens has given you an idea of the kind of ways we can present our information. We're always developing new activities and new designs. So that's really the most exciting bit about the project, is thinking about how best to convey this information on teaching in an online friendly way. So that's it from me. If you do have any questions, please feel free to ask at the end or write it into the message box. And yes, happy to answer them anytime.
Yeah, so while everyone's thinking of questions, I've got one come in now, so about learning environments, and how can learning environments be innovative, but most people are still giving lectures, and what can we do to encourage more varied teaching? David, do you have any thoughts on that question?
Yes, I think one of the things we're seeing at the moment is that a few years ago people had to be pressed to be innovative in their teaching, whereas now I think that there's more of an impetus and an expectation that we should be doing things differently. In some institutions there's such a push towards innovative teaching, like for example flipping the classroom at UTS, that it's almost impossible to continue with your traditional practices. I'm a bit wary of having the top-down kind of model where you only do innovative things if you're kind of required to do so. And I think what we're seeing at the moment is the recognition of teaching is working through people being recognised, not for doing traditional teaching very well, but by the innovations they take up. So that when we see people advancing through teaching, what we see is people advancing through innovation, evaluation, improvement, and demonstrating that they are being more and more effective with their students. So a few years ago I was very keen on how we should press people to be innovative, whereas I think we've, in many institutions, are quite close to that being something which is quite acceptable. Of course, there are other things getting in the way, like workloads and things of that kind, so I don't want to underestimate that. But I think some of the incentives are in place now.
Okay, great, thank you. We have another one. Is it hard to get staff involved in teaching development? Do you have any suggestions? How can an online course encourage teaching development and complement any in-house certificates, etc.?
Well, I mentioned during my presentation that we've just included in our enterprise agreement at Deakin the fact that you can and be paid for undertaking training in teaching as a part of any contract, no matter how modest your contract is. So I think one of the things that we need to think about is building into the employment arrangements the fact that we want development. So we're selling our students short if we just employ someone for a couple of hours a week and we expect them to go straight in front of a class or straight in front of a market activity and provide no support and no training for that purpose. So I think one of the things that we're increasingly looking at now is taking teaching seriously by institutions, which means funding it seriously and employing people to do what is necessary. It used to be the case that people that taught first year classes had this tremendous burden on them when they had huge numbers of students and very little support. And the reason for that is that they were being ripped off. The funding that was going with the large class was being distributed elsewhere within the faculty. But now, certainly at Deakin, what we're seeing is that if you've got a large class, you've got a huge resource to play with. And I think that is something that we're seeing changes in the way in which the distribution of teaching, not just to staff, but the distribution of resources for teaching is also changing.
Okay, thanks very much. We've got another one come in. Do we have data on whether students like teaching innovations? Some students really like the traditional lectures.
Yes, the answer is yes, some students do like that. And one of the reasons they like that is because they're comfortable with that and they've succeeded and they've managed to suss out a way of doing well in that particular medium. But the learning outcomes we're trying to address in all our programs now are far more sophisticated and wide-ranging than can be dealt with through a traditional teaching approach. So we necessarily need a range of different practices to go with the range of different outcomes we're trying to achieve. So we're not putting innovations in for the sake of innovations. We're putting them in because they're necessary in order to meet the outcomes. And one of the things that we have to do when we do these things which students are perhaps uncomfortable with, unfamiliar with, is we've got to not just pretend that we're doing the same as usual. We've actually got to persuade, we've got to encourage, and we've got to induct students into new ways of doing things and persuade them by letting them know through data, through information on previous cohorts, that by doing these things, you're more likely to get to the outcomes than the alternatives. And one of the interesting things is we've got an awful lot more data about innovations in teaching than we have about traditional teaching.
Right, and also actually, just to follow on from David's answer, just to emphasise again that the UTCS programme, it is going to be comprehensive. So while we want to focus on the range of teaching approaches, we won't be ignoring lecturing as well. That will be covered in the teaching large classes section. So yeah, as David mentioned, it's all about the range of approaches and how you can combine them. But yes, we'll also be providing information on large class teaching.
Yeah, and we shouldn't assume, Tessa, that large class teaching means lectures.
Sure.
I've just finished a piece of work with a colleague who teaches a first year unit with 1,500 students per semester, both in face-to-face and online modes and on 4 campuses. And she doesn't give a single lecture, and she's got some of the highest ratings for that unit in the whole school. So we need to be careful about the assumptions we make about what is effective and what students like.
Okay, great. And we've got one final question that we've got time for. So how to deal with different demographics in the one class? Students fresh out of high school are more likely to be attuned to innovation than older students returning to study.
That may or may not be true. It depends on where the students have come from. The only thing we can assume is that students will have an extraordinarily wide range of educational backgrounds and experiences, both in terms of content and in terms of culture. What that means is that we need to very carefully induct all our students into the ways in which we do things. And if we do that carefully, then we can encompass that wide range and not just advantage students from high school. In fact, one of the things that we don't talk about very much in universities is that, by and large, people that do not come direct from high school tend to do better as students. They perform at a higher level than those that come straight from school. And this can be a little bit of an embarrassment for the school leavers.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. So just moving on to the final slide. You can see our contact details here. If some of you have already been in touch with us regarding this University Teaching Core Skills collaboration, we can give you a lot more detail in regards to pricing and timescales for the collaboration. So please do contact us if you have any questions at all. We're also able to provide you with a trial of one of our existing courses. So if you'd like to get a look and feel for how they function, please do get in touch and we can set you up with that. Thanks very much for attending this webinar today. I hope you've had a good rest of the day and we look forward to hearing from you. So thanks very much everyone and goodbye from us.